Today is May 19th, 2008. I am Eric Michnik, and it is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Ashley, North Dakota. Can you please state your full name, including your middle name?
Harold Schlenker. I have no middle name.
Okay. And when and where were you born?
August 28, 1924.
And where were you born?
Well, that was out on the farm. They had a local doctor from Ashley here. His Doc Merkline was his name.
Okay. Can you share some of your earliest memories with us?
Well, I would say growing up in the dirty 30s was kind of hectic, you know. There really was nothing, you know. The parents were poor, you know, and they had a scrape, you know, to keep the family, you know. So they had something to eat, and otherwise, later on in the years, it got better after, I would say, after 36, 37, things started to get better. And the beginning of 40s was when it really started getting more mechanized with the tractors and other machinery, and then well, actually what I really don't remember too much. Say, for instance, you know, after I grew up in the later years, we always had a help along on the farm, and then after that I went into the service for a while, and after I got out of service, well, then we got married. About a year later, in 47, we got married. And as far as the first years, I rented a farm right away, and we actually had electric light. I went ahead and I wired the house, so we had a 12 volt or 6 volt light. And I had one of these small wind chargers. Whenever the battery went dead, I charged the batteries and carried it up to we had a outside stairway to the house we had there, and I had the battery upstairs there and connected to the wire, and then we were there at that farm that we rented about 2 years, and a tornado went through there, took the roof off of the barn, and we had just fallen asleep, and we had the window open, and I was going to get up and look out, close the window, and I looked out, the roof of the barn was gone. So I told the owner that owned the farm there, he didn't have to build up, so at that time that was in 49, we moved up to Culm, which was a mile and a half west of Culm. And we farmed there for 13 years. Then I had so much back trouble, I finally had a quit, I couldn't even push the clutch in the tractor in anymore. And we sold out and moved down to Ashley. And from then on, well, we joined, I was on a member of the Ashley Ambulance Squad, charter member. We started out and I was on the squad for 15 years there. We owned a laundromat here for 23 years in town. And I still did farming from town. And after they claimed I had 2 discs that were degenerating, and by using traction on, I got over my back problem, so I went back to farming. They used to call me the sidewalk farmer because we lived in town here.
All right.
And I was on different organizations, member of the Lions Club, and you lose it a little bit. I was on the city council for a number of years, and on the church councils. We go to the Zion Lutheran Church here in town.
Okay. When you were growing up, did the house that you grew up in have electricity in it?
No, not from the start. Later on, we got like a 32 volt, and they wired it up. Then we had electric. Well, they even had like you could iron with the 32 volt iron, and it was quite an improvement,
Do you remember roughly what year you got electricity there?
Well, up in Cullen, when we moved up there in '39, they had just come out with REA at that time. And that was the first, otherwise we just had that 6 volt light that we used on the other farm.
Okay. When you were growing up at the farmstead that you grew up in, where did you go to the bathroom?
We had an outhouse with a Sears Roebuck catalog. And a lot of times, they had these, they used to wrap apples in this, and that was kind of the thing that was used. And later on, we had one of those portable ones behind the furnace, and that, you put some chemicals in there and you carried it out once a week. That was kind of, during the winter, that was a good thing then.
Whose job was it to dump the toilet?
Well, they were so often, either one of us, the kids had to do it, And that was put down in the outhouse then.
Okay. How often did you take baths?
Well, that was with a round wash tub, And, well, maybe once a week. That was about it. Because you had to carry in the water, and you kind of had a conserve with the water.
Did you have to share bath water with your brothers and sisters?
Yeah, and that never was dumped, Everybody took a bath in the same water.
Who got to go first?
Well, I think we kind of took turns off and on.
Okay. How often were you supposed to brush your teeth?
Very little at that time.
What did you use when you did brush your teeth?
Well, a lot of times, salt, because toothpaste at that time was, I don't know, I don't even remember that we ever had toothpaste, or soda was used sometimes.
Okay. Did your mother have a garden?
Yes, she usually had a big garden, and that was close by the house. And we used to raise just about every vegetable and watermelons, and even like sunflowers, uh, to chew, and then popcorn. So at that time, they never bought much other stuff, everything. Like my mother used to make soap out of the cracklings from when we butchered, the rendered the lard, and then from the cracklings, and they made soap out of it. And
Do you remember what else she put in the soap besides lard?
well, lye, and I don't know if there was anything else, but I know and like with the washing machine, we had one of those uh, old-time washers, with a little engine. Uh, well, that was like a one-cylinder engine that run the washing machine. And later on, they come out with a Maytag. I can remember they had a one-cylinder motor on them.
How often did your mom do laundry?
Well, that's kind of a good question. There too, they didn't really wash that often. I would say once a week at least, but they always had to carry in the water, and to
Where did they get the water from?
well, like I said before, we had a cistern, and that was rainwater, so that was uh, more soft water than usually your well water was hard water, and that made a better washing then.
Okay.
But then for drinking water, we always had to go down the creek. We had a well down the creek. We had to haul it up the hill for drinking. And there too, we had to take turns whenever. We used to have one of these earthen crocks, and that was in the cellar, and my dad had piped it out, and you could press a button, and I think that was about 5 gallons in there. And it always, in the cellar, it was cooler, so and it was down the basement.
What else did you keep in the cellar?
Well, all the canned fruit and potatoes. We used to have like what did they call it, the deeper hole where the potatoes were in. They kept real good that way.
Did your mother do a lot of canning?
Yeah, she did a lot of garden canning.
Do you remember her system of canning? Do you remember how she did it?
Well, she, like pickles, she put the spices in there, and then like your, I don't know, she didn't really can any fruit that I know of, but like carrots, she'd can those, and beets, and corn. That's about it.
Did she ever can meat?
Yeah, that she did too. See, there too, in our earlier days, when they butchered, they had a lot of times hang it down a well, and that was down the creek too, because that well was dug by hand. And uh, say, for instance, now later on, we after the dam was done, we built an ice house, and we had one of this old wooden ice box, and we'd always put a chunk of ice in there, and that was our refrigerator later on. And a lot of people come to our house there to get ice, and during the summer. We usually had ice, I would say, up to August. We'd pack it with flax straw and
Where would you get the ice from around the lake from the dam?
from the dam that was close by, and we'd cut chunks, and then we'd have these ice tongs, and we'd kind of, uh, get it out of the water, and then we'd have like a block and tackle to pull it up into the ice house, and then we'd pack it in there, and so.
Would you sell the ice, or would you just give it away?
Well, yeah, we charged sometimes a quarter at time. That time, a quarter was money, but we never did charge that much for it.
Okay. Who usually prepared the meals in the house?
Well, my mother did. And she was a good cook.
Did you have a summer house for cooking?
No, no. Being we lived in the basement, that was always cool during the summer there. And
What were some of your favorite meals that your mother cooked?
like dumplings, strudels, uh, knipfle and sauerkraut.
How did your mom make her sauerkraut?
Well, they had one of these cutters, she raised it in the garden, and then it was cut and put into like a crock too, and packed down. And then when it got sour enough, I think she put it in jars.
Were there any meals that you disliked?
Not really. We were brought up what was put out you ate. I can remember I used to stay at my grandparents, and they lived in Ashley here, and sometimes they'd dish in something in your plate and you didn't quite like it the way, and then he'd said it in German, "Es was in Teller hast," eat what you got in your plate. And I still feel this way, you know, a lot of times, like the buffets nowadays, people pile up their plate and then a lot of times they leave half of it set. I don't see that right, because we got too many hungry people in this world. And you should, you can always go back if you feel you want to eat more, but to pile up your plate and then not eat it, that's not right. I feel that way. Because we were brought up, you had to eat because my folks were conservative, and that kind of sticks with you, you know, when you grow up like that.
Did you or any of your brothers ever have to help your mother in the kitchen?
Oh yeah, I helped my mother a lot in the kitchen. I used to, when they'd leave, like go visiting, and sometimes, you know, they'd stay over, I'd be at the kitchen, I'd do the cooking.
What types of meals would you prepare?
Oh, like I'd fry eggs, you know, and bacon sometimes, and sometimes mother had prepared something before a little bit, and ate leftovers, you know. So, but that's one thing, we never went hungry.
Where did your family take their meals?
What do you mean?
Or where did your family eat their meals? Did you sit at a table?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. As a family, we always ate together, and there was always a prayer said before the meal.
Do you remember the prayer? Would you like to
Uh,
say it for us?
Komm, Herr Jesus, sei unser Gast, segne uns, was du beschert hast.
What does that mean?
Well, how do I translate that? Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest, and let this food to us be blessed.
Okay. How would you sit as a family? Did you have assigned seating?
A what?
How did you sit as a family at the table? Did you have certain seats that?
Yeah, we usually had our own places, you know. We had like a sort of like a bench on the back wall, and like us kids would sit and on the bench, and parents would sit on the front.
Okay. Did your family ever make ice cream?
Yeah, we made a lot of homemade ice cream. Being we had that ice house during the summer, we made quite a bit of ice cream too.
Do
Yeah.
you remember how that was made?
Well, with milk and cream and vanilla for flavor, and sometimes they'd put like maple nut flavor in and put a few nuts in there.
You mentioned earlier that they kept meat in the well. Did they ever make their own sausage?
Oh yeah, that was a must, you know. Like in the fall when there was butchering done, there was sausage and hams made, and they were put into a crock too with brine, and then after so many days, they were taken out and put in the smokehouse, and it was smoked. And a lot of times, being there was no refrigerator or anything, it was like the hams were hung in the granary, and a lot of times, like the sausage was dug into the grain. The grain was cold, that kept it there that way.
What did they use for sausage casings?
Well, I can still see my uncle clean the intestines from the hogs. He'd sit there with a little board and a scraper, and he'd turn them inside out and wash them quite often. And I still think they were cleaner than the ones we buy today. And then, there was little that was lost from hog, like head cheese was made. The stomach was used to put that head cheese in, and that was all cleaned up, and then pig's feet, they made pickled pig's feet. And, in German they used to call it, they made Koledetz, which was like pickled pig's feet, put some vinegar and some seasoning in there,
How did they make the head cheese?
Well, they used the skin from the hog, and well, they used some like I think they used like a little bit of liver, I think, in there, and I really couldn't say what all was put in there, but I know that the skin was, and even the ears were used. They cooked it, and from the head, and they used some of that meat that was on the head, was used in the head cheese, I think.
Okay.
And then liver sausage was made, and a lot of times that liver sausage, they went ahead and took the lard, and when it was melted, and put that liver sausage in and poured that lard in to seal it off, and that kept real good that way.
Did they ever make blood sausage?
My parents never did. Neither did my uncles, because they usually went together and did the butchering together when they.
Okay. What was your family's attitude towards alcohol?
Well, we used to have wine once in a while, but we never, that there was any drinking going on.
Would your family make this wine themselves?
Sometimes they did, yeah. And so a lot of times Dad would buy some, like a gallon jug.
Did they ever make any root beer?
Yeah, I can remember, like even beer was made, and sometimes that got pretty wild, When they'd open it up, it would shoot up to the ceiling. And a lot of times they'd take the water pail and kind of hold it there, just in case it would. It got kind of wild sometimes.
Do you remember how they made their root beer or their regular beer?
I know they put some yeast in that beer, but I don't know what all they was put in to it or how it was made.
Okay.
I can remember uh, I was real small yet, and that was during the probation days. My uncles and my dad, they had a own brewery where they made this 190, you know, and I can still remember, you know, Dad had in the house, uh, they had boards on in the ceiling, you know, took out a board and they had stored it up there so nobody would, you know, find it.
Where was their still?
Well, that I don't know where they actually had it, but I can remember in the later years they used that copper container where they cooked that corn mesh or whatever it was in there. They used it for an tractor oil in there. That's the only thing I can remember about. But there, in those years, there was a lot of people that made their own, like 190, the home brew, you know, they called it.
Okay. What types of clothes were common when you were growing up?
Well, paper overalls, you know, the ones that, and as far as other clothing, well, Sunday clothes we had like a suit, you know. But during the daytime, you wore these bib overalls, and we used to wear boots. These like an 18-inch boot will go up to here, you know.
Where did you get your overalls and your boots?
Well, usually my folks used to go up to Fredonia. They called it the Fredonia Coop store. And anyway, they bought most of the clothes there.
How often would they go there to buy new clothes?
Well, not really that often. Like in the fall, my dad would take some wheat up to the coal mill, they called it. They made flour there. He'd trade the wheat for flour, you know, and usually then they bought right around 1,000 pounds of flour, you know, because they made a lot of things out of dough, you know. And then they usually got a little sack of cream of wheat with, if you bought the flour. And anyway, that's held us over the winter, because usually during the winter you hardly got to town, because the winters were pretty tough in the earlier years, you know. And then there was no snow plows like there now. And
Did you ever feel isolated in the winters when you couldn't?
yeah, sometimes they got pretty long, you know. You know, but then uh, we they had like these self-made games, you know, like checkerboard and oh, there were some other self-made games, you know, that like card playing was a no-no in our house, but we used to sometimes play upstairs when we ever heard the door. We'd put them under the cover.
What
But
type of
Dad never, Mother didn't care so much about if we played cards, but Dad, he that was seemed like they had that idea that it was kind of like a sin, you know.
What type of card games did you play?
Well, usually pitch and whist. We used to have a country store out there which was about 2.5 miles west of our place. We'd go over there and then the owner there, whenever we get there, well, they have to play a game of cards, you know. But I guess my folks knew that we played cards, but in our house, no cards were ever played.
Okay. Did your parents make any of the clothes that you wore at all, or did they buy them all?
Yeah, mother did some sewing. Yeah, I think like some dresses and aprons. They used to wear a lot of aprons, ladies at that time. But I don't remember that she ever sewed any pants for us.
All right, let's talk a little bit about religion. How important was religion during your childhood?
Well, that was important. When Sunday morning come around, you didn't know any different. That was, you went to church. And usually the young ones had to sit in the front row, and if anybody got a little bit out of hand, they were taken care of.
What was the rest of the seating arrangements like in the church? With the children up front?
Yeah, children up front, and then like the women on one side, on the left side, and the men on the right side. And that went on for many years, I can remember.
Did your church have a pastor of its own, or did he make the rounds?
He made the rounds, because at that time, I think there was 4 congregations, or maybe 5. And you had the minister maybe once a month. And then otherwise there was reading service. Like the deacons had to take over and do the reading service.
How long did church usually last?
Oh, usually an hour, sometimes depends on how long-winded you got.
Did you have a big dinner after church?
Usually the Sunday dinner was chicken noodle soup at home. That was pretty much the average. And in most places, I think it was. And then when there was Mission Fest, some of the neighboring church people would come. They were all, invited by different people for dinner then. And they had a service in the morning and in the afternoon then.
What was Mission Fest?
Well, that money that was brought in for Mission Fest, that was sent away to places where they really needed, to help out the people.
Okay. What were some of the religious activities that you participated in growing up?
Well, there for a while I was a Sunday school teacher when we got married. And later on, when we moved up to Culm there, I was on the church council there, and even we helped build a church parsonage up there in Culm. And then when we moved down, I sang in the choir up there too, in Culm. And then when we got down here, I think I missed 2 years, and they hooked me into it, and was in the choir here till we started going south, and then we kind of hung it up.
Okay. Were you baptized or confirmed as a
Yes,
child?
yes. I think my baptismal certificates, I don't know, did Elvina show that or not?
We haven't seen that yet.
I think it's out on the table in that.
What do you have right there?
This is my baptismal certificate, and I was baptized October 26th in 1924.
And which church were you baptized in?
Zion Lutheran, out in the country.
Okay. And do you have your confirmation certificate as well?
This was, I was confirmed May 28 in 1939.
All right. And did you do your lessons in German or English?
That was all done in German.
What types of things did you have to memorize for confirmation?
We had to memorize, I think, it was over 100 Bible verses by heart. And then we had to memorize like the catechism, the creed, and the I don't know, I don't even have my catechism here. This was the Bible stories in this one, and yeah, that's just the same one. But like we had 10 Commandments, in German, the articles, and I know we had to memorize a lot by heart, which was pretty tough sometimes.
Do you have a family Bible?
Yeah, this is my folks' Bible here, and there's a kind of family history recorded in here, which is in German, and a lot of that I really can't read, but then there was some that my folks put in English into this Bible here. So that's about it, and you can see this was used quite a bit.
Were you able to question your religious teachings?
Really, at that time, I don't think so.
You, go ahead.
because we were brought up, in the Lutheran faith, and that's all we knew, so.
You mentioned earlier that your dad didn't want you playing cards. Was anything else restricted because of your religion?
Well, one thing, when we went visiting or went away, he always said a certain time we had to be home. Because I can remember sometimes when we'd be a little later, like after 12 or so, he'd say, "Where were you guys so long?"
What would he do for punishment when you got in trouble?
Well, I really can't say that my dad ever, he gave us scolding, but that was about it, and we knew what to do then.
Okay. You learned confirmation material with German. Was German used during church services?
Oh yes, yes, that was all German at that time. Even like when we moved up to the Culm area, that was in 49, they still had a German service there. And when we moved down to Ashley here, they also had a German service.
Did that ever change during World War II? Was there any pressure put on the church to stop German services?
Not that I know of. Probably in some communities, probably, but not that I know of in our area here.
How did your family view other faiths?
Well, I know my folks used to, the Berlin Baptist Church was, I'd say maybe 4 miles from our home place. We used to go over there, We didn't think any different, That was their faith, and we had ours, and we had sometimes, like when we had Christmas programs, we had some of the Baptists take in ours, and so, and that was about, in that area, that was about the only, well, there was some congregational, or they call them Methodists now, further south, but in our area were mostly like Baptists and Lutherans. Then we had some Seventh-day Adventists, which were a little northeast of our home place. And that church is still going over east there by close to Highway 56, south of Culm.
What was your favorite holiday?
Well, I would say Christmas, because they had all these goodies, and then, mother would buy like candy and nuts and.
Did you get any presents?
Actually, not that many, no. Usually we got like a bag of goodies, and that was about it.
Did you go to church for Christmas?
Oh yeah, yeah. We usually had say a little verse, and you'd get up there, you'd be so nervous, you'd be shaking, in front of the people. And
You mentioned earlier you had Christmas plays?
Yeah, like even like in rural schools, they had these Christmas plays, and usually that schoolroom was packed full, and as far as in church, I can't remember out in the country that we ever had any plays like that they do nowadays. We just had these little rhymes or verses that we had to say, and
Do you remember any of your verses that you had to say?
no, I'd have to say no to that.
Who did you celebrate Christmas with at home? Was it just your immediate family, or did you have extended family?
Well, it was usually just the immediate family, sometimes, like my uncles and aunts would, like the close ones, get together, but otherwise it was mostly all just immediate family.
Did your family celebrate Easter?
Oh yeah, there was Easter Monday, that was also a holiday, and like Good Friday, that was always, and like Ascension Day, that was always a church. Uh,
Did you also celebrate Maundy, Thursday?
oh yeah, yeah. I don't think there was any of these church holidays that weren't uh, held, in the early days.
Did you have any type of Easter celebration at home?
No, not really, not that I know of. Usually mother painted some Easter eggs, and then we'd have like a Easter basket, she'd make up in the morning when we got up. They had it sitting there.
What would be in your Easter baskets?
Well, usually a colored egg and like sometimes like a chocolate rabbit, and peanuts. That was about it, I guess.
Did you celebrate the 4th of July?
Yeah, that usually when it was close by, I can remember one time we were going to go to 4th of July in Fredonia, and as we drove, we had to drive through the pasture, and all at once it started raining, and we had to turn around and go. So that was our 4th of July then.
When you went to town, what type of activities did you do for 4th of July?
Well, we usually bought some firecrackers, and we used to have these little. I still have one of those. They had a roll you put in a little revolver, you'd shoot those, and that was about it. And then sometimes, they'd have like stay for the fireworks, but not too often because you usually had to go home for milking, and then you didn't drive anymore back to town.
Did your family celebrate birthdays?
Yeah, not that much, but off and on they'd probably bake a cake or so.
What about New Year's? Did your family ever do anything special for New Year's?
Yeah, we used to go out and doing New Year shooting, with the neighbor. I know one year we took in 13 farmers, and I used to do the welcoming, New Year's wish, and but that was pretty hectic. They give you a drink in every place we got there, and I can remember one time we come home in the morning. It was I think 9:30 in the morning when we got home. But Dad didn't say much that time. He knew it was.
So, could you describe a typical New Year's night for you when you went out shooting? What did you do?
Well, I can remember we had a 32 roaster with a rumble seat in there, and there was 6 of us guys that drove around, and we went in the ditch one time, and we pushed it out again, and and started out again. And, but that was usually the common thing, when New Year's come around, the younger boys would go around and do the New Year thing.
All right. Let's switch over from holidays and talk about growing up on the plains a little bit. What was it like for you growing up on the plains?
Well, growing up, we were on the farm, and that's all we do was to help with farming, and as I said before, we had tough years in the dry years, and Dust Bowl days, and but actually we were content with what we had, We didn't know any better.
What did you find beautiful or enjoyable about growing up on the plains?
Well, you had a lot of freedom as far as that goes, you'd you could kind of do your own thing, if you wanted to, and actually, you never got to town that often, and so you kind of had to do your own thing.
What did you find bleak or unpleasant about growing up on the plains?
Well, I think the hard work, but I think it never hurt anybody. A lot of times you got kind of frustrated, when you had to do this thing and that, but
What was a typical winter like for you?
the winters were pretty tough in those years. I can remember a lot of times you didn't get no meal for maybe a couple of weeks, and sometimes I think they didn't get to town for maybe 3 months because the roads were always blocked, and at that time a lot of these roads were just trails, and so that's why they usually bought a big supply of food for the winter, and that kind of held them over then.
Okay. Did you have any different chores in the winter than you had during other seasons?
Well, usually there was milk cows during the winter, and had a haul hay, that was all done by hand, a pitchfork, loose hay. And whenever, there was a lot of snowstorms, whenever the weather got better, you had to haul some hay, for the cattle, and so they got fit.
Could you describe a typical fall for us?
What I mean.
The season of fall?
Oh, well, I can remember one fall, during harvesting, it was awful wet, and my dad and brother, they used to run the binder, and I can remember the low spots, they'd kind of go closer, and I'd have to carry out the bundle so they could get closer to it, and that was quite a chore to do that.
What was a typical spring like for you?
Well, that was always, when we did plowing with the horses, I can remember my brother used to have the two bottom with horses, and I followed him up with the one bottom behind him. And then it was harrowed, and seeded. There was no fertilizer put on, no chemicals. That was about it. But then a lot of times there was a lot of mustard, you know. The whole field was yellow, with mustard plants.
Did you have a favorite horse that you used?
Yeah, I used to have, well, my brother and I each had a pony that we used to ride to the neighbors, and we used them quite a bit. I even, when I went to school, I had like one of these 3/4 horse ponies that I used to ride to school once in a while. I'd take along a bag of hay for them. They had a barn in the school there, so he had something to eat during the day.
Okay. What were summers typically like for you?
Well, in the dry years, they were real hot summers, and like I can remember during thrashing a lot of times, one time we had to quit because it got so hot, we couldn't really stand it, hauling bundles. And that day I can remember we thrashed at the neighbor there. One of their cows died of heat and a horse.
Would you ever go swimming in the lake from the dam?
Well, I never got to do much. I used to go down, and like take a bath in the dam there, and but I never did learn to swim that good. We used to fish like these bullheads in the dam there.
What did you use for bait?
Well, sometimes we used, did actually bite on anything, like worms and Oh, sometimes we took like a little piece of meat or something like that, and because they'd bite on anything.
What did you usually do with the bullheads when you caught them?
Skinned them and fried them. And that was a pretty good meal. They didn't have no scales in them, you know. And
Were there any other animals such as geese or ducks at the lake?
yeah, wild ones in the fall they would land in the dam there. I even shot a goose one time in the dam there. And then my mother used to raise geese too, you know.
What other animals did you have?
Oh, you mean on the farm?
Yeah.
Well, we had pigs. We never had, well, I did have one, I bought one sheep with a bottle fed, but otherwise we didn't have any sheep on the farm, never. We had raised pigs, chickens. That was about it, I would say.
Okay. When you shot that goose, what type of gun did you use?
I used my uncle's double-barrel shotgun, a 12 gauge.
Did you have any guns of your own when you were growing up?
Oh yeah, I used to do a lot of trapping and hunting. Yeah. Years back, they paid bounty for hunting coyotes, and I can remember one time I was skidding off some bigger rocks off the field, and we used to live in a kind of hilly area, and I knew there was sort of like a hole there, and I drove up there with the horses and kind of saw that there was something going on in there. And all at once the coyote kind of come out, and so I went back home and I got my rifle and with the old Model A coupe, drove up there, and got up there, and sure enough he was still in that hole. And I shot him and I dug out 7 pups. And at that time, I think they paid $2.50 for a coyote and $1 for the pup. Well, that was a lot of money at that time, spending money for it. And in the winter, I'd hunt rabbits, you know, and like weasels. A lot of times I'd stomp in the snow and haul home like 3 rabbits at one time. And then I'd skin them, you know, and send them into some distant fur company, you know. And then in the later years, there was muskrats, you know, that were trapped. And yeah, you tried to get kind of spending money wherever you could.
Okay. Out of all the seasons, which one was your favorite season?
Well, I think mostly maybe in the winter time. Uh, you're a little more relaxed, not as much work. Uh, and you used to go more visiting, you know. Otherwise, during the summer and fall, you were always too busy to do the things.
Okay. Ask you a couple general questions about your childhood. What was your most stressful childhood experience?
Well, I would say when I had my tonsil taken out.
And what was your happiest childhood memory?
Well, I would say when my sister got married. Uh, we had a real good time that time.
How old were you when she got married?
Oh, let's see, I was about maybe 16.
Could you describe her wedding for us?
Well, she was married in that Zion Church, country church, which is at the Heritage Center here. And that was on June 30th. But the year that I can't quite remember now. But anyway, the reception was held at our farm, in the house. And I can remember it rained quite a bit, and we got the organ from the church. We had taken it down before, and so we got it back home that evening. And I know it was quite a muddy road when we had to drive through a field, just a barley field, and sometimes you get off track, it was quite a mess.
What did you do as part of the celebration after the wedding at your house?
Well, they did singing, and they really didn't have a dance or anything, but just visiting and singing, and they had drinks.
Okay. What was the most adventurous thing you did during your childhood?
Hmm. That's a good question now. I really wouldn't know what to say.